Show it to the mayor.
More than the average. I thought I was gonna be late, I'm right on time. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the work session for the Sierra Vista City Council for August 8th, 2017. Rachel sends her regrets. She's feeling a little bit under the weather. But other than that, since we got an agenda and a full body here, we'll go ahead and talk about discussion of item A, which is the council meeting agenda. And obviously, we'll call to order, do the roll call, pledge and prayer. We have awards and presentations. You doing the business? Okay.
Thursday.
Yeah, on Thursday. Item 2 is the public hearing item on the community development block grants.
That's right.
And it's pretty self-explanatory. Matt, if you want to share anything else with us? I know we got the updated proposal in our packet here.
Yeah, the public hearing is the final opportunity for citizens to weigh in on the annual action plan for the proposed use of CDBG funds. The table in the memo describes the projects and services that will be undertaken over the next 2 years using the appropriate amount of $236,107. Summary was published in the paper on July 19th and on the city's website, and no comments have been received to date. Following the public hearing, staff will submit the plan to U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for review and approval. We anticipate receiving authorization to proceed with the projects in late September, early October.
Questions for Matt? Further discussion?
Yeah, I just got a couple questions. One, so nobody from the public's spoken out. I think in general, probably consensus. I don't think I'll be going against it. The questions with the, just so we can kind of tighten up the piece with the, what were we talking about? The city's program to demolish uninhabitable homes to stabilize the neighborhoods. That was kind of, I think, where we had to go back and have a little bit more discussion on. So the program itself is the city will fund the demolition, correct? That's the extent of our participation.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're not buying anything for anybody.
No.
All right. The property owners, is there more than one property owner that would benefit from this service?
Yeah, we anticipate $15,000 will fund at least 3 demolition projects.
No, let me back up. So
Okay.
within the city, the people who own the properties where these trailers are at, which I assume we're knocking out the trailers, correct?
Or dilapidated site-built structure, but
Okay, so it could be any of that.
we anticipate, given the funds available, it'll probably be manufactured homes.
Okay, manufactured
Right.
homes. So within the city, the people who own those mobile home parks, how many actual people own their own property that can benefit from this? So for example, there's what, a handful of mobile home parks in the city?
Yeah, and this would apply not only to mobile home parks, but also individual lots with mobile homes on them.
Okay.
Yeah, to help cloud the issue, we also have mobile home parks where they have individual landowners within the parks as well.
That's okay.
Yeah.
All
Right.
I'm trying to establish is that there's a competitive market. That's what I'm asking. There's not a single person who will benefit from the
It needs to
program.
be a competitive award of the
Yeah.
Right.
benefit.
That's right.
what I'm asking.
Yes, it'll be advertised to solicit interest
Okay.
in participating, and then we will review each application for qualification under the criteria that's been established. I believe you received a copy of the program guidelines, and then we will,
But there's more than one person eligible to
yes,
bid on this.
yes.
Okay, that's
It'll
all.
be open to the public we'll invite applications.
Okay.
I wish there was only one we had to deal with, but unfortunately, there's many.
Right. All right. I'm good, Mayor.
Yeah,
Thanks.
okay.
Thanks, Matt. I got no questions.
Okay, any other further discussion? Thanks, Matt, appreciate it. Next is the council meeting minutes for July 27th. Any additions, corrections, comments, further discussion on the council meeting minutes? Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the property tax levy. And again, there's Linda, okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council.
This is the final step of the budget process, the adoption of the fiscal year 18 property tax levy. A public hearing was held on July 27th, and there was no comments. The property tax rate remains the same at .1136 per $100 of assessed valuation. This levy will generate an estimated $359,240 this fiscal year. Are there any questions?
Questions? Thank you very much. Done very well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We next move on to item number 5, which is the request to proceed on the Fry annexation. Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you. The resolution scheduled for consideration seeks the council's authorization to start the process of annexing the Fry Town Site subdivision. Borrowing Pastor Sexton's words from this morning's invocation, the essence of what we're trying to accomplish is creating a seamless community, one city with one shared future. Annexing county islands on a proactive basis is called for in the city's annexation policy adopted in 2008 and reiterated in the city's general plan and recent strategic plans. The territory under consideration consists of 274 tax parcels constituting approximately 85 acres. Rather than take an all or nothing approach, we are proposing to subdivide the annexation area into 9 sectors or block groups so that neighbors can decide together on whether or not they want to join the city. The block group approach will result in legible and efficient service delivery boundaries. If you authorize staff to proceed, we'll start the formal process by filing a blank petition with the Cochise County Recorder's Office. A public hearing will then be scheduled for your first meeting in September. All property owners and the Cochise County Board of Supervisors chairman will be mailed the public hearing notice and annexation map. We will post the public hearing notices at public places in the annexation areas and publish legal notice in the local newspaper. Following the public hearing, you'll be asked to consider a resolution to start the petition process. City will have 1 year to collect the minimum required signatures of 1/2 or more in the value of real and personal property and more than 1/2 of the persons owning real and personal property. That would be subject to taxation by the city as shown by the last assessment of the property. The petition process will be run similar to previous efforts. Staff and volunteers will be knocking on doors and calling distant property owners to collect signatures. We've included in our agenda backup material our updated brochure that will be handed out to residents and covers the benefits of annexation. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Well, I'm just going to make a comment, Matt. When we tried this before, there was a question about some of the commercial folks. And there are things that are allowed in the county commercial districts that may not necessarily be allowed under the city commercial districts. And the way we explained this in the past, if you're currently doing a function that's allowed in the county that's not allowed in the city, that business function, whatever it may be, will be grandfathered with the new annexation. So for that, as long as you do that purpose, once you stop doing that business practice or that service, whatever it is that's granted, then it ceases. But it'll be grandfathered in, and that's still the case, right?
It is still the case. Our general commercial district is very permissive in terms of uses. I think potentially our dimensional standards may be a little different than the county, so it wouldn't necessarily be a non-conforming use, but maybe a non-conforming structure in some instances. But those existing setbacks would be grandfathered in.
And that's what I guess I should have said is the non-conforming use of the non-conforming conditions.
It'd be the non-conforming conditions
would be grandfathered.
That's correct.
Okay.
So did that mean there are no non-conforming uses? Is that what?
The uses would also be grandfathered if it's currently allowed under the county, and they come into the
Okay.
city.
Right.
The uses should be grandfathered as well.
Okay.
It's
So-
if they stop doing whatever that use is after they're in the city on their own, then
That ends it.
it ends
They
it. But
can't
it's
sell
not.
it to someone
No,
else.
well, no. We're talking about could be a lot of things like painting cars or acid treatments, or, I mean, it could be a lot of odd manufacturing, and those kind of things. Window treatments, whatever, that we may not allow for whatever reason.
And if you'll recall, the council approved an expansion of the permitted and conditional uses within the general commercial, which is what would be put in place for those properties zoned in the county as general business. And if there are inconsistencies, the mayor's correct, they would be grandfathered in and it'll be allowed to perpetuate, so as long as they don't cease operations for more than 6 months.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Question.
Oh, please.
So once we proceed with the Fry annexation, once we start down this path, and I know the goal is to go out there and get the preponderance of the property owners to sign off on it, just shortly, or in short, how are we gonna, what's our primary mode of outreach gonna be? Do we think we've already kind of got that locked up? Do you need council support? Some of us are more favorable out there than others. We need to get them rallied up and get them
Sure.
out there banging on doors.
Well, I think the initial canvassing effort will be led by staff, and then towards the end, if we need to rally the mayor and the council, we'll definitely pursue those avenues. And but I think the initial canvassing can be done by staff,
Can you give us an idea of generally what that canvassing will entail? Is it just gonna
door to door.
just go up, knock on the door, say sign
That's
the
right.
petition?
And we'll also
You-
be
you
using
get your-
volunteers.
You get
that are
your,
interested in
everybody gets,
participating.
get a mailed official notice, and
Right.
and it's time to start knocking on doors.
That's right.
Awesome.
Cold
Let's do
calling,
it.
cold calling, that's good. All right, anything else?
Yeah, I
Yes,
had
ma'am.
a couple of questions regarding initial feedback. I wanted to give kudos to you and your staff, first of all, for the outreach that's been done thus far, the Star Spangled Spectacular, the brochure that was given out. I thought that was very, very good information, concise, very clear. Have you gotten any feedback on or what was your feedback from the Star Spangled Spectacular and the brochure that you've been handing out?
The feedback's been mixed. Tina Moore is our annexation lead on this project, and she's consulted more people beyond just the Len Roberts Park event than I have, and it's been both positive and, again, there are certain individuals that prefer the status quo to continue and would like to remain in the county, but we think in the end that there'll be strong support by a majority of the residents. The distant property owners may be a little more challenging. We'll just have to see. It's too early to tell, I think, what the consensus of the neighborhood will be ultimately. I don't think we got a representative sample just at that one event.
That's fair.
The numbers were small
well,
in
I
terms
mean,
of the Frytown site neighborhood, but through the Carmichael meetings, that's
Yeah.
where we see more enthusiasm. The people that are active at a grassroots level, trying to effectuate positive changes, and so we're hoping to build on that momentum and capture interest and convert them into signatures.
That's great. It's good to see that you're leveraging the Carmichael Neighborhood
Yes.
Association. They're very passionate, positive people. I think that's all the questions that I have.
Anybody else?
I do
Yes,
have
sir.
one question, and it kind of led me to it when I was
Oh, no.
brainstorming. Let's assume success, and I'm not asking for like a full briefing now, but let's assume some success. We get the preponderance of the signatures that we need, or it looks like that we're very likely going to get them. At what point would council receive essentially a transition plan of where the city would now come in, start taking over, the transition of services, what happens next? When would we start getting briefed up on that? Would it be 60 days before, 30 days before?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mount, typically what we've done in the past is we'll give you updates along the way as to the status of the annexation. The community development staff has always done a terrific job of highlighting properties in green, red, yellow, maybe, so that we have an idea as to where they are. And so you'll know in advance, probably, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this internally, My recommendation would be that we wait to bring all of the petitions to you. So we have 11, is that correct, 11 sections? So we have 11
9.
sections, or nine. We have 9 sections. Let's say we get 5 of them, or let's say we get 3 early on, and then my recommendation would be that you kind of group them, wait until they're together. It goes into effect 30 days after the council approves it. So at that point, we're it, and we're trying to provide that. So as things get closer and closer along, the staff will start putting up plans, and it will brief you, so it won't come as a surprise to you. How are things going to change? The good news is that you already have included in your strategic plan an evaluation of the public safety services, because we know, and we've talked about this at the council meeting, that we can expect there to be additional calls in Fry.
Sure.
And the chief is well aware of this. And while it's going to be an additional demand on his staff, I know his department does support the notion that over time, they'd be able to make an impact in that area and gradually see those calls reduced. But it will definitely be an impact, and I think it's something that the council needs to be aware of. So, I wouldn't expect to see anything kind of come to fruition for a good 6 months.
Okay.
And typically we'll do the mailings first, kind of see how things go, then wait for the holidays to pass. And then maybe in the springtime, really begin in earnest those door-to-door efforts. In the meantime, working with the out-of-town properties, because that's going to be a big effort right there. But we typically were giving on our last major annexation effort, which was the Montebello neighborhood across the street from the Public Works facility. That was almost 350 single-family homes, and so we would regularly give the council those maps and updates on where we were in the process, and I feel confident that the staff will do that in your executive report and individual or group briefings over time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
the other
you.
thing that's important to remember about services, obviously, we talked about police and fire. We know the demand will go up, for at least a time period in that area. Most of that area is already on city sewer, so the challenge may actually be how we handle the garbage, literally. Okay,
Correct.
so that may be something we want to take some time to look at.
Yes, and if I may, Mayor, what the city has always done in the past is we've offered the extension of the city refuse services, but we haven't required it because some people have had their private hauler for a long, long time, and so we've offered it. Usually it's been less expensive, plus we've added recycling, so, but we, for example, still in the Montebello neighborhood, there are still some holdouts of people who prefer their private service, and we've never made them switch over, and I think we would handle it the same way with this transition as well.
When we start to go through the transition, I apologize for asking questions. I know everybody wants to get out of here today. We can expect, obviously, again, assuming success, we start, kind of working through this stuff. What is generally going to be the plan for as people start to acclimate to the changes and they have the complaints come in about dealing with trash or recycling, or, they're dealing with new types of officers, maybe people they haven't ran into? Just generally speaking, the philosophy that you're taking with your staff on how to make sure that they're welcome and we all kind of get through this together.
City staff attends the Carmichael Neighborhood Association meetings, and that's the venue that we've been
Right.
using to communicate with the neighborhood residents, and we'll continue to do that through the annexation process. So that's one forum, and then I believe, Judy's team will also be messaging those residents and how to communicate with the city on any questions or concerns, and we'll certainly be visible with code enforcement, patrolling the neighborhood and introducing ourselves and getting the residents acquainted with our building and property maintenance standards. And I'm sure police will do this. It will have a more visible presence and be doing similar outreach.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. We all good?
Best of luck to you on this journey.
Have to be optimistic.
It'll be a good experience overall, I'm sure. Next, we move on to item number 6, which is the appointment of the 2 members to the Environmental Affairs Commission, and reappointment of 1. Any comments on those 2? Okay, that completes our relatively short agenda for Thursday. Next up today is the discussion on the council executive report, and everybody should have a copy of the July report. So I guess Mrs. Jacobs is going to take the heat for Mr. Patuchik since he's at his son's college graduation.
Happy to, Mayor. Honestly, I kind of hit on most of these things in this morning's Spotlight Breakfast, so if you have any questions, let me know.
Going once?
If I may.
Yeah.
I saw that at some point, and I can't pinpoint it right now, but basically it was something to the effect of about 30 new business permits this month, give or take.
Towards very, very end.
Do we keep track of how many people are not getting new business permits, or is that something that we only get back in, say, January? Is it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Wolf, we do keep track of who is not renewing, but you're right, we're kind of on a mass renewal process. So we'll have a better idea when that renewal comes up. And yes, you're right, there will be people who will get a new business license and then, you know, might have just been a small home base and they decide it's not working out and so they don't renew it the following year. We do follow up with them and we use our economic development staff as a intro letter to them. We intend to do that again with the renewals. But we are seeing some activity in business licensing, and I think that's a positive thing. And as I mentioned at Spotlight this morning, you know, they're getting that personal touch, those, hey, welcome, what can we do? And that's been been received very well by our new licensees. And some of them are also, they had licenses, they let them lapse, but still, those touches make all the difference, even if they had a license 2 years ago and just forgot to, to re-up it. Not that that would be anyone here in this room or anything.
I just want to mention, I overhear Maria on a regular basis making follow-up phone calls to make sure that they've got their license and that they're dealing with issues with licensing. So Maria, you're doing a great job, and thanks. Well, we're doing that. We're doing the whole executive report.
Oh, the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to just make a couple of comments on the PD and a couple of things. Were you done, Christine?
Yes, ma'am.
I just can't help noticing the disturbing trend in the police department report on the increase in assaults, especially assaults on policemen. Thank you. I was just commenting that I couldn't help but notice the increase in the violent crimes, although there was a nice reduction in the home burglaries and that sort of thing. And I don't know, really, I don't have a question. I'm really sorry to hear about that, and I wonder if there is anything PD can do about that.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, before I turn it back over to Adam, and he can talk in a little bit more detail, I think it's safe to say that we're seeing some national trends affect locally in Sierra Vista, and that these are disturbing trends that we're seeing all over. But again, as I mentioned earlier, you already indicated the need for this organization to take a look at our public safety requirements and to bring those to you so that we can, so that this organization can do what needs to be done in the future in order to meet the safety needs of our community. And a part of it is going to be analyzing data. Mm-hmm. And so, but I'll let the chief jump in now in response.
I do agree with you. It is a disturbing trend. Regarding some of the stuff that the officers assaulted, some of these stem from, if you've also noticed, the increase in suicidal subject calls that we're reporting to. And a lot of those instances, they are combative. And in this particular case, out of that 16 officers assaulted, 4 of them were from one incident where they were shot at by an individual. Again, it is a very disturbing trend. It is very concerning. When it comes to the aggravated assaults and that kind of stuff, we believe a lot of that is stemmed to some of the narcotics use and trade. And so our community response team is working really hard on dealing with those individuals to get a handle on that. So I think a lot of that does stem from some of the narcotics use. We are, obviously experiencing a huge increase regarding suicidal subjects that we're responding to get them the help that they need. And so we are working, in partnership with Simpatico on those to get
Right.
to get a handle on some of those issues. In fact, we're going to be housing some of the crisis response team members in our department so they have a quicker response time.
Right.
Try to get help to those individuals. So
Some of CBUS's crisis response team or
it's
Simpatico's?
NurseWise Simpatico, Simpatico's crisis response team. So they respond. They're on call and they respond from their houses all over the county.
Yeah.
So they will have an office in our building. So they'll have a quicker response to our calls for service to
That's
try to
terrific.
get that help.
That's a great plan. Glad to hear that.
And we are, the reduction in property crimes, we do see ebb and flow in that, obviously. But we do attribute the reduction to a couple individuals that are now sitting in jail and prison. So
Oh, yeah.
that does help when we finally catch those guys that are doing a lot of these.
That's great. I did see somewhere a report concerning the opioid epidemic hitting the country, but Sierra Vista and Cochise County looked like they were very low in deaths attributed to the opioid epidemic. Do you?
Probably low in deaths, but we do have a serious problem with it. Heroin is making a huge increase. We do get we do have several overdoses from this in our county and our community. Luckily, we end up getting there quite quickly ourselves in the fire department and able to administer the proper Narcan to make sure that they recover. So it is an issue. It isn't at the issue that you might be seeing, like say in Ohio and that kind of stuff regarding the overdoses, but it is increasing.
This is an area I'm just kind of curious about how folks, agencies, groups are responding. Is there any efforts, or do you know of any efforts that are being made now? I'm not sure where, in public education, with doctors. Do you know of anything going on in the community? And if not, I think
There is a statewide effort that initiative put on by the governor's office regarding and with the Department of Health Services regarding training both not only law enforcement and medical, but also community members and schools regarding overdoses and what to look for and those kind of things. It is quite a hard nut to crack regarding this, and so the substance abuse issues have been going on for quite a while, and it does seem to continue. So, but there are efforts statewide, and there's a lot of trainings going on right now for both law enforcement and other community members regarding this issue.
one more question around that, the Narcan. I saw something, and maybe you can refresh my memory about, is it available for who can get it, and is there special instructions for use, and is the public involved in that at all?
So right now, it's as far as I know, it's restricted to the medical and law enforcement personnel. There is a program now through Department of Health Services and Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training Board to get Narcan into officers' hands. Right now, the fire department has it, and the two paramedics that are assigned to our department as officers that are also paramedics have the Narcan so that they can have a quicker response. But we are going through the training. There is training that law enforcement has to go through as a department and individual officers to get that Narcan in our hands. And there is grant funding through the state to provide that to officers that we're working on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anybody else?
I did have a question about the ambulance service.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I was going to
Go
touch
ahead
on
and finish.
some of that too. But
Okay,
please, you have the floor.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead. Go ahead.
One of you,
I'll take a
please.
breath.
All right. Where do I start here? Okay, so I guess the first thing is the month-to-month comparisons of what was in the budget for sales tax and where our actuals are at. Looks like we've got a nice little run going a couple months in a row where, keep fingers crossed, where the revenue is exceeding the projections, which is always very good. I'll probably piggyback on some of that with when we talk about the meetings that we've had around the community here shortly. I will say this, probably about a month and a half ago, for some reason, I was in talking to the owners of Sierra Cycles, and it's good to see their project illustrated. I know that they're extremely happy with the impact fees being waived, even temporarily. I know it's going to help them out. They're going to be able to be more competitive. That's something that's real. I would ask the staff to consider if there's any way else that we can get that information out, that if people are looking to develop, looking to build, looking to expand, now's time. I think that would be a good investment, and I think that would give, especially your department, Matt, the opportunity to kind of stretch its legs with some of these bigger projects if we can get them in. But again, thank you for that decision. I know management, it's a hard one to make, but to see 1 or 2 new businesses come in, I think it just builds that morale up and that esprit de corps within the community. It's good. It's fun to work off of. I was going to bring up the ambulance services.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things, and maybe we can address this for a later work session when that time comes up, but I know we all got the letter referencing the ambulance services. My response back, I did have a talk with the owner. I've had a talk with the economic development director as well, and a few others around town. And let me just state right now that I do believe in a free market, and ultimately the customer here is the fort. They get to pick who they want. With that said, to not be so specific on this case, I do think that as a council, some of the points that were made in that letter are valid, even if not to the specific case, but to what are we doing for economic development. And I'm probably not specifics yet until things kind of get worked out, but where my first interest would be what would happen to the salaries of the people who could jump over from being private enterprise to public employees. Are they going to stay whole? If there's a decline in that, plus the city's picking up the tab, then we'd even lose the multiplier effect that would go in with a salary decrease. That's a concern that I would have. I do think the points about the private versus public enterprise are there. I do think that that's got to be measured against the free market. We're not the customer. The fort's the customer, and letting the fort make that decision. But I do think we as council need to have those discussions a little bit, and also know that this is about public safety and about some other types of services. But really, what is city council, what's our philosophy for these types of things that are coming up? And I know I raised my hand just like everybody else, so I'm not skirting the issue here, but seeing that letter made me want to kind of go back and reflect and see, did we have all the information we needed, and what else do we need to discuss, if anything? Just even ask as an advocate or a representative for that person. So.
Okay, and that issue is not part of the agenda for today, but so just
Yeah.
next comments, please just keep that in mind. Yes, ma'am.
That covered, oh no, I did have that covered essentially with a lot more word than I would have used.
I talk a lot.
But that was essentially, I thought maybe we need to just address a couple of the things that were in the letter so that we would be sure we were making the right decision. My other comment, no, that was it. I did want to ask if you were meeting with Behavioral Health Services, and you had that covered in the document, so I was just happy to hear that.
Okay.
That was it.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, may I just briefly respond to, since the item is in the executive report, we're not out of line in having I just want to throw out a few things, and then we'll get a written response to the council on that issue. Mr. Mount had asked some specific questions, and city manager had gotten me on starting a response for that. So we'll get something in writing. What I can tell you, just a couple things that came up today, Mr. Mount, is that we were very careful about looking at the current salaries of those employees to see if we can be competitive, and our proposal does indicate that we would be competitive with them. I also wanted to reassure council that 100% of the cost of this service will be paid for by the fort with no subsidy whatsoever from taxpayers. So it's completely built into the proposal, just as it would from any other provider, with a cost increase, again, if it's accepted by Fort Huachuca. But we'll get you some more detail to those questions.
Okay.
Was this the normal time that would have come up for contract review? Was this
Yes.
just a normal?
Mr. Mayor,
RFP
Councilmember Calhoun, the contract is officially up at the end of December, so January 1st is the end of the contract, and it's already on a one-year extension. So it was the fort, again, who reached out to us and requested that we explore this opportunity for this new method that was approved in the Defense Authorization Bill of 2014, which allows for those for military installations to work with local governments on services that are typically provided by local governments, and certainly ambulance transport is one of those services. And the reason why we're moving forward with this is because it simply is in keeping with the City Council's strong partnership with Fort Huachuca in the past and trying to do things that add military value, save them money over the long run, and responds to their needs. And so that was really sort of the underlying philosophy to it. But we do understand the concerns of a business. The Fort used to provide their own ambulance services, and they stopped doing that about 9 or 10 years ago, largely when their hospital closed and they didn't have a place to transport them anyway. So, so they're kind of going through that transition as well. And when this opportunity came up, they wanted to pursue that with us.
As a rule, or even as a projection, do we see any other opportunities that are out there that the city would feel obligated to pursue, that we may want to discuss, or is this simply a one-off? Is this something that we need to start having more discussion on in general, so that we maybe decide we don't want to do it this way, or we say, okay, that's the cost benefit? In other words, how do we proceed in the future if an opportunity like this come up? Because we are talking about a business owner and his business now being affected.
Sure, and that's a fair question, Councilmember Mount. The garrison has expressed an interest in wanting to put our heads together to see if there are more opportunities for intergovernmental service agreements. And so if this moves forward and it's successful, we'll be sitting down to put our heads together on what those might be. We've long talked to them as an example about being their refuse provider. And in fact, we are their refuse provider now to all of their single-family homes up on Fort Huachuca. Now, that contract is officially with Michael's Military Housing. It's not with Fort Huachuca, so it wasn't done through an intergovernmental service agreement. But we were able to provide a level of services that they weren't getting from their contractor, namely recycling. And so they were very anxious for the city to be their refuse provider, because they were getting poked by DOD for not having enough recycling on it, and so we were able to help them meet some of those goals. So refuse might be could be some maintenance things that maybe they're contracting out that we might be able to do a portion of. We don't know yet, but our goal would be to do things that would not cost the city any additional funds, because that's very important that the city is not directly subsidizing what's going on in Fort Huachuca. But if we can get economies of scale or easy response or that type of thing, and it's good for them, then obviously we want to provide that level of support. But what we can do after that kind of brainstorming occurs is bring that back to council and have a conversation with you and get some policy direction on that.
And I think but that's kind of the point, is like this balancing act that has to be done through council, and that's why council needs to probably have a discussion at a later time on what's the philosophy that, I can see where there's some natural links to some of these things, but if it starts to encroach onto private Sierra Vista businesses that are providing that, and that's their sole source of income, and that's going to put them out, that might be something that we need to go back and kind of take a look at and figure out, again, I believe it's a balancing act. Is the Fort able, the Fort can ask for whatever they want, but if the city is able to go in and provide a service just due to our size and scale and infrastructure that ultimately makes it towards not really a competition, because nobody on the private market could possibly match that, then is it really a competition? And then the second question I would have is, if it starts to happen on a widespread scale, are we now causing some harm to other companies that are there? Especially if we start to cut people's pay, because again, multiplier effect,
Right.
You're taking money literally out of the net of the economy. And then the other would be, if there's a business owner, stands to imagine they probably are well compensated. and that wealth can't be replaced if it's gone. It's just, it leaves. So I just want us to be recognize that part and then figure out where are the natural extensions, keep that in scope, and then try to avoid over competing with our own private infrastructure as well. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm just asking for that discussion to take place at a future time.
Okay.
One thing I think that would really help with this, when we get recommendations from staff, ideas regarding anything really, is a clear pro and con approach to what they present to us, so that if and that did happen in this case, where we knew another entity was in place already, and that we might be we might be able to win that award, but continue that and add perhaps other types of information that would help us make a better decision regarding who would be affected by the decisions that we're making.
Certainly.
I think it's a good point to sit down and have this discussion. But I just got to state that historically, our guiding principle has been we support the fort. We've had many opportunities to do things. For example, putting special radio packages into the GSA vehicles where there was not a local source for that. We've done some other striping and things for the vehicles. We maintain the lights up on posts, the traffic lights. And there's other things that are kind of unique that we've always done to help support the fort and try to add military value to try to preserve the economic impact of the fort. And if we want to have that conversation, I think it's probably a good thing to do and sit down and talk about that. But essentially, that's where we are, and that's what we've tried to do in the past.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else?
About the report?
Yes, ma'am. We're still on the report.
Okay, one more comment. I just want to thank Victoria for, this is the second time I've noticed, probably happened more often, but the stories that you include in your section about a person. The one last month about the lady who swam and walked, and this month on the young lady. I think the stories really help the community see the benefit of those quality, especially the quality of life items that we offer, and I appreciate it. Just want to thank you for that.
Okay, we ready to move on to item C? Report on recent trips, meetings, and future meetings. And I've got nothing because I haven't been anywhere yet. Sir.
I've got a few. I sat in on the Bicycle Pedestrian Action Committee yesterday that the MPO put on. That was my first time going to an MPO meeting. I know Linda was there kind of herding cats. Anyways, it was quite interesting. I know that some of the projects that they're working on, pretty interesting. I didn't get to sit through the whole thing because I was kind of double booked all week long, but I look forward to some of that. I'm wondering if the council in general, if those are the types of meetings that would be beneficial to council as we start to work through them, or as members of the MPO, do we just want to kind of regurgitate what was there at some of those things before we get too far along with some of the discussions?
Well, I think the best way the question is, what's the best way to share it with council? I would hope that we're going to get a back brief at the MPO meeting for us members of the MPO board that weren't there for the bicycle meeting. But again, we need to figure out the best way to get the information to council, and maybe having Dan or the chair to brief us on initiatives at some point in time would be the best way to do it.
It was actually it was interesting. You know, I think I got a smile. I was very clear I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of the League of American Bicyclists, but I was very supportive of what they were trying to get done within the context of that. And I think that there were some ideas that were shared that were certainly mutually beneficial to the community at large, as well as the cycling community. But I think that's going to require some careful thought, right? We're dealing with limited funds, even through the MPO and through some of the grants that were being looked at. But it was intriguing. It was a learning experience. Certainly a motivated group of people who were vested in the discussion. So whoever picked the committee members did well there. Also went and I met with the CHA board. Just real quick, I hadn't had a chance. The Southeast Arizona Hospitality Association. I used to be a member of that board. I am no longer a member of that board. I'm not a member of any boards at the moment. But it was interesting to get back in there. They had some natural concerns with, what is the city doing with economic development, the county tourism board changes. I've kind of repeated this. Mayor, you and I talked briefly earlier, but just the understanding that it's a new opportunity to stay engaged, get back in touch. Let's figure out the best way to go about it. Probably the best information that they provided was I did ask them where are they seeing the increases in their hotel revenue coming from. Essentially what they're seeing is a lot of overflow from the hotel up on the fort is at capacity, and that there's more people coming in and out of the fort, at least at the moment. So they're reaping some of that, and they said that the system that's in place for them to take advantage of that and their partnership and their coordination with the fort is, I'm paraphrasing, so if I don't get this right, it's my fault. But they're much more organized with them in order to handle that overflow. So it's very seamless. They got a nice system. And obviously, as a community, as business owners, they're benefiting. As a community, we're seeing that in that executive report as well. There were a couple others. I know we did the spotlight today, but I'll be quiet about that. But those were 2 meetings that I went to this week.
Okay, anybody else? All right.
Future
board-
meetings, excuse me.
Well, future meeting, sure.
Just want to comment that the Arizona League of Cities and Towns is coming up towards the end of August, and I think it starts on the 22nd, which is a council work session day. So I know, pardon me?
The work session
Has
is
that been
canceled.
canceled?
Yes.
Okay, good then. And related to what you just mentioned about MPO and CHA, there are several groups like that I think it would be beneficial to council members to have those on our calendar. I don't know how the other council members feel about that. There's certain ones, and maybe we can just make that known, which ones that I often forget to check to see when those meetings are. But like MPO is one, CHA is another.
I like that idea, and here's what I think. I think it's an extension out to even like the chamber.
Exactly.
Everything
SACA.
else is to, we do it with our commissions, but we have, our other community partners to get them in and say, what do you need help with? What can you help us out with? And see if we can start coordinating down those lines. I don't think we've ever done something to that scale, but it would be probably pretty good.
Well, I think the best way to handle what you're suggesting is we identify as council those folks that we think other council members or we would benefit from meeting with on a regular basis, and kind of set up a separate little one-on-one meeting with either the boards or the leaders of the group, so that we can have an information exchange with those folks. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
You mean separate from having
Well-
their information on a calendar?
Well, we would still have to post it as a meeting. But I'm not saying that we don't do it as a formal member of the work session or at a council meeting.
I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
I just meant a calendar, just
Well,
their-
you just looking for a calendar of
just
when people meet.
when they're meeting, so we can
Oh,
choose or not
okay.
choose to attend their meetings. But to know and to remember all those meetings, now maybe Alicia doesn't have any trouble with this, but to remember when those meetings are and so on and so forth.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Calhoun, we did start adding the MPO meetings to your executive report along that blue bar. So one of two things, we can do this one of two ways. If you want to give us a list of all of those organizations you'd like us to keep track of when their meetings are, we can either include them on all of our executive report on the bar, or we could send you a meeting invitation like we do, and then you could cancel, accept, put a maybe, whatever, it gets it on your calendar, which is fine. And we can have Jen and Gina do that in our office. If you get us the list, we got it, no problem.
Okay.
Then it's on your calendar, but then you gotta check your city calendar, just saying.
Oh, you mean nobody's going to make a personal call and,
City calendar.
got it, that's a good,
I'm down with
I like
that.
that.
I do that
Okay.
all day
Yeah,
long
I like
anyways.
that.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, so if you
Better
would let
way.
us know individually which are the groups that you want on, then I'll give that list to the office, and we'll start tracking it, and we'll reach out to their organization, say, hey, when you get your meeting scheduled, can you please just forward it, the information to us?
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right then.
Wait,
Board.
one.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
this is something that myself, Gwen, and Craig attended that I remembered.
Three of us.
The rain grant
Oh, yeah.
update from the chamber.
That's right.
Yeah, that was a very interesting meeting at the Legacy Foundation that gave an introduction into this RAIN grant. And I think it would be interesting. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they could come during a council meeting at the end and do a 5-minute presentation for the entire council. I'm
wonder-
not sure what would be best, but the
Yeah,
information
I think
was
it's more
good.
appropriate for a work, if
A
it's
work-
something like
work
after a work
session,
session,
yeah.
give them 5 minutes up front and let them go, or 5 or 10 minutes. That'd be,
Yeah, a
if you
work
think that's,
session.
if you think that's appropriate, we need to go ahead and make the invitation.
Sure.
Okay. Now, am I ready to go to board and commission updates? Okay, let's go to board and commission updates.
Or minor
Crickets.
later
Crickets.
on. Haven't had any yet.
Crickets. Okay.
You
Sierra-
know I have
oh.
something. No, go ahead, go ahead.
Sierra Vista Second Saturday will be on the second Saturday, which I just had the invitation pulled up on the 12th. This is going to be actually a special one. It's the last one for the season. It's going to be all day from what I understand, but you can find the information on Facebook at Second Saturday Sierra Vista. And if you haven't been to one yet, I really encourage you to go.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Just a couple of comments. One, the Sister Cities Conference is being held October 6th and 7th. It is open to the public, especially the Friday night before the full conference, which is on Saturday, the 7th. And there'll be more about it on Facebook and probably invitations that'll go out to everyone, or to many folks. The Friday night is going to be pretty interesting, and I can't say any more about it because I don't remember everything that's going to be on it. But it'll be a full meeting, a full evening of networking. The West End Commission is looking at trying to encourage businesses to do murals on on their property, and also they're talking to businesses about putting out flowers similar to what the Landmark has done in order to just beautify a bit on the west end of town. And the Environmental Affairs Commission is working on an Environmental Merit Award, which has some criteria that has gone out to the community. And I don't have the deadline on that either, but go ahead.
It's already passed.
Okay, the deadline for submitting has passed. I'm not sure when the award will happen either. We don't have a date yet for that. So they're really looking forward to it, and we are too. That's all on that.
Okay. We all clear? Future discussion items and council requests.
Can we get a review of what we've already asked for that's coming up, so we're not double tapping this?
Absolutely. So at your next work session will be the first one in September. We have the election rule change that was proposed, that is currently being reviewed. We also have, now I can't find my notes. Victoria may jump in because I mentioned those to her. We'll see. We have requested and will be scheduling in the near future a transit update. We're also scheduling the economic development update is now going to go back on the quarterly cycle, starting your first meeting in October.
Sweet.
And then it'll be every quarter after that. So we're, first work session in October, that's correct. And then the first work session in January, and then every quarter after that. And then I swear I have one.
I've got one on my list for the second meeting in September. We have the strategic plan implementation plans.
Thank you.
I have one as well. The status update on the proposed redevelopment area designation.
I knew
right.
that. And we're doing that the first meeting in September.
That's right.
Yes, so
That's
that's what
the-
happens
that's
when
the
you're lame duck.
pinpoint?
You just don't write everything down anymore, so, right.
That's not the that's not the area, but it's the people who volunteer for their own personal property? Okay.
Yep. Status update.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have your first work session in September
Pretty well-
relatively
pretty
full.
booked,
We're
yeah.
working on your second one, and then we have other things that are in the works.
Okay, so much for summer vacation, huh?
That's
If we
right.
get through half of that, I'll be happy. So I don't have anything new.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, I don't see anybody jumping up here. Dan, you want to jump one more time?
No more, I'm done.
Okay, you done for today? All right, well, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and well, hopefully we'll see you on Thursday. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
You don't do community